People who don't reply until days later. Why? It's usually because I read the message while I'm doing something that I can't reply in that moment, and then I literally just forget. Ironically, it's because I often try to be thoughtful in my responses. Sometimes I will read a message and I won't have the will or time to give it the thought or depth that it requires, so I'll put it off to when I can really think about it. Oftentimes it slips my mind because my working memory is kind of trash. It's a relatively, very, new phenomenon that basically anyone in your life gets access to you at all times. It was only 20 years ago that if you left the house for the day you were actually gone. You'd return messages when you came back hours or even days later. Basically I prefer this sometimes. Some days I don't feel like talking to people. Just because technology has gotten to the point where you can reach someone instantly does not mean that person has a responsibility to instantly respond. Edit. Because I don't want to. Sometimes I just truly don't know what to reply to you. The comments on this one should be empty until a couple of days from now. I reply to them in my brain and forget to reply to them in real life. Executive dysfunction. I'm an introvert and it actually takes a lot of energy for me to respond to people. I much prefer talking in person to someone, but for some reason messaging drains me. It's nothing against the person I haven't responded to, and I usually tell my friends it's the way I am and they understand. So unless it's urgent it could take me a couple of days to respond until I have the energy. IDK, it's like I just can't. It feels overwhelming, so instead, I like to consistently go through a cycle of forgetting to respond and then chastising myself for not replying, so I decide I'll do it later, but then I forget. It's just on and on until I finally do, and it's always, hey. Sorry for just responding. Fill in blank. Here. Peas, thanks for the reminder. I just texted my friend who texted me back on Tuesday. This was the push I needed. Sometimes I just don't have the energy for it. I recharge and relax by being alone and doing things that take very little effort. I'm also not on my phone a lot. I'm a university student taking full units, while working simultaneously. Skeptical smiley face. What's a cover song that's better than the original? All Along the Watchtower, Hendrix. Respect song by Aretha Franklin, originally by Otis Redding. Johnny Cash's cover of Hurt. Man of Constant Sorrow by the Soggy Bottom Boys. From Oh Brother Where Art Thou? Bang Bang My Baby Shot Me Down by Nancy Sinatra is way better than the original from Cher. The Animals cover of House of the Rising Sun, and They Might Be Giants cover of Istanbul, Not Constantinople. Johnny B. Good. Chuck Berry. The original version is performed by Marty McFly in 1955 at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. Torn by Natalie Imbruglia. Alien Ant Farm, Smooth Criminal, I Said It. Tainted Love by Soft Cell. Nirvana, Where Did You Sleep Last Night, Lead Belly cover. Holding Out for a Hero by Jennifer Saunders. Four Non-Blondes cover of He-Man's What's Up, https://m.youtube.com/watch?v=6 nexnxnkc. House of the Rising Sun by The Animals. Hallelujah, by Jeff Buckley, original by Leonard Cohen. Amy Winehouse's cover of Valerie ETA, wasn't expecting so much response. I personally also prefer the original and agree the cover is overplayed. However, I think the cover is objectively better musically. Respect by Aretha Franklin is the best cover song. But my favorite is by the Fugees covering Roberta Flack's Killing Me Softly. Norah Jones also did a beautiful cover of Don't Know Why. Blanket NDAs are now illegal. What can you finally tell us about your former employer? I discreetly took my NDA, I was in charge of them, when I left. My boss is a ucking itch and not even her kids can stand her. That is all. They misused pandemic assistance funds. They bought back a shitload of shares from employees under the pretense of, we know the extra cash is better now than later, and then went public shortly thereafter. The bonus is that the CEO then admitted he was using some of that money to finance his divorce. They laid off 160 people so they could afford to give the COO a 30% raise. 2 different places I worked created roles for minorities with a plan to not retain them, so they hire more minorities to satisfy quotas. If you were any good, they would promote you to a real JO band, hire another minority. Someone in HR told me, the reports only show how many the company hires, not how many they keep. Not an employer but a client had my company sign ANDA to never reveal his personal life. One of the world's most well-known financial guys worth tens of billions. Anyhow, tear down and rebuild he and his wife's personal home. Demoing her bathroom and huge blackberry real-looking dildo falls from the top of her vanity cabinet. The timing was such that she walked in right at that moment. Everyone looked at it and then her. She says, "Well, X doesn't UCK me anymore." She picks it up and kisses it. Walks out. A publication I worked for completely embezzled from the parent company. The editor-in-chief hired their best friend as creative director. Creative director contracts their husband as a men's fashion editor, when the publication had no men's fashion section and was not a fashion-related pub. He was paid thousands monthly on retainer and almost never came into the office, and if he did, he never did any work. On top of that, he was paid postage fees for travel images he took and where printed. That family took a one-week trip for a story, brought their child, and submitted a $40,000 expense report after for it. Oh, then there were the future invoices for her husband's USH fees for his photos, while they were being paid to be there because it was for a story. Other editors-in-chief from other publications we re-given a $25,000 clothing budget every year and a daily black car driver to take them to the office. When I worked for another title in the building that EIC submitted a very high expense report which included his groceries. The company would even provide interest-free down payments to EICs for homes, but they stopped doing that. Meanwhile, they ran multiple rounds of layoffs a year, consolidated staffs so they worked across multiple titles, and paid peanuts to regular employees. I was laid off from that company twice within 2 years, and they didn't vest my 401k match because both times I missed the cutoff by months. I worked for the political consultant best known in DC circles for having gotten a dead fish in the mail from Rahm Emanuel. The consultant was a super weird boss. Full of shady business practices, including expensing all of his personal hit-like family vacations to the business. But this is the story that tends to blow minds. My former employer had me print out his emails so he could handwrite his responses, which I would type up and send back. I worked for a great fintech startup that got acquired by another company that was pretending to be a fintech, but was actually a private equity company that would buy and gut competition. The owner of the new company is a real-life billionaire villain. He bought an island and cut off beach access to the locals. A real piece of hit. My team wasn't touched in the acquisition because we were deploying the product to the customers, so we're the ones that brought in the revenue. A tone point. The new owner was a huge what to my awesome boss. At that point we started a mass exodus. 90% of the team left in the next 2 months. This killed a $10 project and set the ****. Acquisition goals back by years. One of my old bosses reprimanded an employee after the employee called HR to file a complaint to Bootham. This is because the HR employee happened to be friend of the boss in question, and the HR employee blabbed about it to the boss. The boss did not get fired, but he did get reassigned not long after. Not sure what happened to the HR employee. I want production workers, like those who worked with the Dugars, etc., to spill some major tea. Our sales department deliberately used deceptively vague language when selling extremely expensive travel packages to disabled passengers. They routinely left caregivers stranded with no accommodation other than the floor, or sleeping in the same bed as their patients. They also routinely failed to provide accessible bathrooms for disabled passengers. They also lost damaged wheelchairs and mobility aids. There was little to no sympathy for these passengers and their caregivers when they rightly complained. When I tried to raise the issue with higher-ups, I was labeled a troublemaker. I left the company back in 2019, but I know nothing has changed in regards to sales. The price for the cheapest trip offered was over $2,000 CND per person for a 2-day trip. The average booking was $8,000 for a 5-day holiday. They charge much more now. Can you imagine paying $8,000 and not being able to shower, or your mobility aid being lost? Then when you complain, you are told you were never promised anything, only, "We will do our best," or, "That shouldn't be a problem." Fucking disgraceful. What is a disturbing fact you wish you never knew? When I visited Sri Lanka, I was nearly perpetually asked by locals if I wanted to hire children for X. One man tried to sell me his 5-year-old daughter. When I refused, he presumed I was gay and offered a small boy instead. Like WTF? That babies didn't receive any anesthesia, even for open heart surgeries, etc. until the late 1980s. I remember watching an episode of the show Monsters Inside Me where this 16-year-old kid was doing something outside and a fly flew into his eye. I only made contact for about a microsecond, but it was enough time for it to lay eggs. After they hatched, they started eating his eye from the inside and he was starting to go blind until a doctor finally figured out what was wrong. Just imagine that, getting your eye eaten from the inside and losing your sight all because a fly very briefly made contact with you. Ever since I learned about this, I get really paranoid when there is a fly around my face because of the fact that this could possibly happen to me. 93% of human history is not recorded. I recently finished a book about World War II in China. So I want to say everything about the rape of Nanjing. Women being raped in puddles of their own hit, little girls being gang raped. Men being used for bayonet and target practice. Men being half decapitated, using a samurai sword to slice half their head off. Women being raped with lengths of bamboo. Yeah, I'm done. The reason why morgues prefer to hire women, not men. Most people on Earth teenagers aren't teenagers. We are possibly on the brink of medical technology and treatments losing 100 years of progress because new strains of bacteria are becoming antibiotic resistant, and finding new antibiotics is a slow process far outpaced by the amount of resistant bacteria. Imagine getting a minor cut on your hand and dying from it. Added benefit: our own immune systems have also taken a hit as well because our overuse of antibiotics has killed a lot of the good bacteria in our bodies that works with our immune system. It's illegal in India to find out the gender of your baby because so many prefer boys over girls. That your organs know where they're supposed to be and move on their own. During surgery, doctors will just stuff them back in and they'll rearrange themselves back to their proper spot. Also the one about your main body's immune system not knowing your eyes are a thing, and if it learned about them, they would be considered foreign objects and be destroyed. Fucked me up pretty bad because I've always had eye problems since I was a kid. Sitting here going, is today the day I go blind? My mom lives far from me and we only get to see each other once a year. She's 65. Even if I'm lucky and she lives until 80 or so, I'm going to physically see her around 15 more times. The idea of it being so limited makes my stomach hurt. A toddler's adult teeth are right below their eyes. How profoundly stupid the vast majority of people truly are. The suicide rates of young women before and after the release of the first smartphones. Spoiler alert. It spiked and hasn't gone down since. In Dubai, I've witnessed the acts of human trafficking and illegal prostitution. I've tried my best to get it onto the light at the time I was there, but everyone there kind of aware of it already and said we no one can or will do hi there. Even the daughter of the crowned king, a literal princess, had tried to escape the country but was caught and brought back. I left the country the next week, couldn't stand the thought of it. Hospital-acquired delirium is insanely common in hospitalized elderly patients. Ever been woken up in the middle of the night by a hospitalized loved one thinking they're at home, in a hotel, in a different hospital, rambling about it that makes zero sense, and perhaps thinking it's a different year? I am every night. And I'm starting to lose my ucking mind. But you know what's ucking hilarious? My grandma at 96 handled 2 weeks in the hospital with no issue, whereas my 68-year-old father literally acts like a patient with dementia. Maybe he's developing dementia, I don't know. Again, I'm losing my ucking mind too. How big anglerfish can get? They're not massive but can definitely get larger than I'm comfortable with given the size of the teeth.